Hey, what is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you guys are doing all right, and hope you guys are ready for episode 12 of our Firebase 3 real-time chat application tutorial. So we have a lot of code to be writing today, a lot of very interesting stuff. So let's go into the simulator right now and get started on what we want to be building. All right, as our logged in user of Jon Snow inside of our entire chat application, we have a list of messages inside of messages controller. So this is kind of my completed version of the application right here. And upon clicking on res-struct, we load the entire log of chat messages for her and Jon Snow, and we do the same thing for the rest of these characters. So I'm going to tab back into my somewhat working version of my app, and let's log in as johnsnow@gmail.com with a super secure password of 6 Qs. Upon logging in, we get a list of messages, and clicking on one of these guys should bring me to the chat log view controller, very similar to what this does right here. It brings me to this chat area, which I can start typing some text. So let's go ahead and figure out how to do that. By first shrinking the simulator and bring it to the corner right there, and I'm going to run the application right now just to verify that my code is okay and kind of good to go. So okay, just restarted and our application looks to be okay. And let's first implement the behavior of actually clicking on one of these cells right here. So let's go to messages controller, and I'm going to go to one of these table view methods and just type enter right below perhaps this height for row at index path method, and I'm going to implement didSelect row at index path, and I actually want to run this function called show chat controller for user. And all we're missing here is this user parameter. First we need to override here, I believe, and we should be okay. So what is this user guy right here? How do we make sense of what it's supposed to be? Well, clicking on one of these cells right here, we get the information for the message from messages dot, see, not dot, but index path dot row. And in there, we have to print out, let's say, message.text, message.toID, message.fromID. And I'm just going to comment that out and run this. So I'm going to show you exactly what is printed out in the console, and let's see where to go from there. All right, so clicking on there, we get hello, Sir Jamie, which is the text, and we get a toID and a fromID right there. So if I copy this one, perhaps, and look at my Firebase console, open up, let's say, this MXSQ value. You see it's Jamie Lannister, and this PI value down here is just Jon Snow, which is this right here. Now the question is, how do we get the user from one of these IDs? Well, because the message is kind of like a two-way street, we have a toID and a fromID, and we can't really guarantee that this is Jamie Lannister or the fromID is Jamie Lannister. It could be either one. So we have to do a simple logic check to figure out which one it should be. And in the last video inside of user cell, we performed this bit of logic right here, chat partner ID, and then we figured out based on the current user if it was a toID or fromID, right? So let's do some refactoring, and I'm going to cut all of this code out, and let's put all of that logic inside of one of our model objects called message. So I'm going to type in a new function called chat partner ID. This returns a, let's see, string optional parameter. I'm going to paste that entire code in there. So instead of calling all of this code, we can get rid of this message right there because we're already in message. For this, we need to import Firebase to get Firebase auth available. And now we can just simply, instead of setting the chat partner ID, we can pretty much remove it right there. And in here, we can just simply return toID and also return fromID. So let's just do that right there. And that looks fine. We can also use a ternary operator to minimize the amount of lines there. For example, if we wanted to make this a one-liner, we can say return that if, let's see, toID, otherwise fromID. So this one-liner and these 4 lines do the same thing. So let's just remove that bottom one. I don't really have a preference on which one, but this perhaps looks a little bit cleaner. Now let's go back to user cell, and we can access message from the actual user cell class, and we can say message dot see build the project first and access chat partner ID. So that's how the refactoring works. And we can use that same bit of logic if we go back to messages controller, and we have this message object again. So let's figure out the chat partner ID by saying this guard let chat see partner ID equals message dot chat partner ID else return, just like that. Now we have access to chat partner ID in the following lines down here. So let me comment that out as well. And with this ID now available, we can figure out what this user object needs to be. So I'm trying to figure out who this user is based on that. And we need to create a reference to, let's see, Firebase, database, reference, child. And this will get us to the users node. And finally, this will say child and chat partner ID, which will get us to one of these nodes right here. Finally, if I say ref observe single event type with this cancel block guy here, this will just use value for the entire user object. Let's use enter for that completion block, snapshot, and let's just print out snapshot. Why don't we? Snapshot, like so, nil for the cancel block. And if we run this right now, every time we click on or select the row on the table view, we'll print out the exact user object. So this is going to print out Jamie Lannister. This is going to print out Ygritte right here, and so on and so forth. So now we can actually construct the user from this entire dictionary right here, which we can access inside of this completion block by using another guard statement of guard let dictionary equals snapshot dot value as this string to any object. It's the object dictionary, else do this right here. Else return if it's not a valid dictionary. Finally, we set let user equals this new user object with empty constructor user set values with the dictionary from above. All right, so now we finally have this user object, which means that we can call this from here with the correct user object. I think we need a self here as well, so self. Let's run this, remove a couple of these empty blocks, and then let's see what we get when we click on this user right here. We bring up our chat log for Jamie Lannister. So that's pretty good. That's not so bad, hopefully not too confusing either. And one thing I actually want to kind of set here is for this user right here, we actually need to set the ID property on it in order for us to type some things here and correctly send messages whenever we handle send. So this line right here where we get the toID, we actually need to set the ID object right here with user.id equals chat partner ID, just like that. So minor detail, we'll figure out why we need to do that a little more in just a bit. So let's run this application now and see what we need to do in order to get an entire chat log with all of the messages for perhaps this Tyrion Lannister character. So we want this entire chat log right here to show up for Tyrion Lannister. And to do that, we need to figure out what is happening inside of chat log controller. And if we first populate this screen, this blank collection view with some cells, it'll be easier to follow what is supposed to be going on. And to populate this collection view, remember chat log controller is a UI collection view controller, which means we have a collection view here. We need to, let's see, go to view load perhaps, and we need to specify number of items in section and return a value of something like 5. It's pretty arbitrary, but that's what we need. And we also need to return cell for item at index path, and this needs to return a cell, which is dequeued from our collection view, which we call a dequeue, with some kind of ID, which is just a cell ID. And index path is from this called right there, and we just return this cell. So what is this cell ID guy right here? I'm going to create this string called cell ID equals cell ID finally, we need to register an actual cell underneath this cell ID, which is collection view register class, like so. Cell class will be just a default collection view cell.self for the actual class, and cell ID will be that guy right there. So having said all that, if we set the background color to some kind of value, perhaps blue color, we can actually see some cells inside our collection view. So I know I did that rather quickly, but pretty sure you guys have seen me do that enough times to understand what is going on. Anyhow, we have 5 cells here represented by this 5 value. So why don't we specify these cells to span the entire width of the collection view. And we do that first by conforming to UI collection view delegate flow layout. Finally, we specify size. So size for item, returning ACG size perhaps, and we'll use this width height constructor of view frame height, and height of perhaps 80 is maybe a good value. So upon running this, these cells will expand fully to cover the width of the controller. So clicking on this, we get this right here. You notice how sometimes the user images don't appear correctly. For example, Sam Tarley is showing up for Melisandre, which is definitely not correct, and we'll fix this perhaps in a later video. So let's go back to this guy and figure out how to actually put these messages inside of these cells first. So the first thing to do is to actually fetch the messages by some kind of observation. And every time we click on one of these cells, we actually execute this setter of the user right here. So if I click on Tyrion Lannister, you see we execute this breakpoint, right? And let me just show you why that's happening. So inside of, let's say, if I just hit Command 6 didSelect, gets me here, and show chat controller eventually calls this function and calls this user setter here, which takes me here. So that's why that's happening. And inside of here, I'll call a function called observe messages, like so. And let's just create this function, why don't we, and paste, and there we go. So what is the actual message node that we want to observe? Well, first, I want to show you how to do this by observing user messages here, and observe all the messages that belong to the current user that's logged in, who is Jon Snow for this case right now, which is this PII value, right there. So if I call, if I let reference, perhaps user messages reference equals Firebase database reference child of this user messages node, and we need to actually specify another child to get to Jon Snow with this path here, which is going to be this UID object created right above with this guard statement of let UID equals Firebase auth current user, and UID giving us the current logged in user. And hopefully you guys are well aware of what guard statements do by now. So anyhow, we will use user messages ref and observe. Let's see, observe the event type. It's the event type of, let's see, this one right here with the cancel block. Event type will be child added for all of the children underneath this node right here. And we'll say enter for this completion block, snapshot. And let's just print out the snapshot for now with a nil cancel block. So every time we go into the chat log controller, we'll see a bunch of print statements with all of these nodes down here. So let's go into this, and we see all of Jon Snow's chat messages right here. So now we will fetch each one of these chat messages from our messages node right here inside of this completion block right here. Okay, so let's do that with another reference of messages ref. And I think I just delete the print statement right now. Equals Firebase database reference, same old dance. And here we specify the messages node with the child of something right here, this is going to be a message ID, which we actually get from the snapshot key via let message ID equals snapshot.key. So this might be a confusing value for some of you guys, but snapshot.key is actually whatever's inside of there, which points to one of these message nodes. So with this reference now available, I can actually observe just a single event type, which is this one right here. And we'll observe the entire value of that node, which gives me, let's see, this completion block of snapshots. And let's just print out what it is actually observing inside of that single event type and cancel block of nil. So I'm going to run this now. And we're going to see exactly what is in this print statement in just a moment after I click on perhaps who's an interesting character here. So you see a lot of Tyrians. So here we go. Let's hit the continue. We get the print statement of this entire value, which is the text for one of the message with from ID, text, timestamp, and to ID. So let's turn this guy into a message and then perhaps store it in some kind of array somewhere. So we access this dictionary very easily with another guard statement like this, guard let dictionary equals snapshot.value as this string to any object dictionary that we need to cast down and else return. Right, so now dictionary is available right here. So what do we do with this? Well, if we say let message equals message like that, messages set values with this dictionary, we just construct it very conveniently because our keys just match. So remember, this has the potential of crashing. So I guess I'll give you guys one final warning: potential of crashing if keys don't match. So that's my my last bit of warning for this function caller here. And now I have all of these messages here. So if I just perhaps print out, let's just make this totally obvious, what the text is and remove that print statement. Every time I load one of these messages, it's going to print this message.text value in the console. So we see all these messages for Jon Snow right here. So some of them don't belong to the character that I'm clicking into, but we'll resolve that in just a little bit. And let's remove the text for now. What do we want to do with this message that we're constructing inside of this observation? Well, to populate the entire collection view with the number of messages that we retrieved back, we first need this array right here called bar messages equal the construction of this message array like so. And messages will append this array right down here. I think we need the self messages.append. This is a message, and we need the self because we're inside of this closure completion block. All right, so what do we get when we run this? Well, I don't think we see any change just yet because we have yet to use the array in any manner in our code. So clicking on Ternary Operator, we get this. What if we now return messages.count? So messages.count is what we need. I think we have roughly 15 or 20 messages inside of our Jon Snow character, so it's going to give us a lot of blocks. So the reason why it's not returning anything is because inside of this block here, we need to actually call self.collection view.reload data, and because we're in a background thread, we need to call. So we need to call dispatch async dispatch get main queue to get back on the main thread, enter here, and call this here. So hopefully you guys are used to this asynchronicity of iOS by now, but we always need to make this call back on the main thread because we're changing UI components with this call. So anyhow, we click on Ternary Operator and we get all these cells for each one of those messages. And you notice how the input area is being covered by the blue cells. We can fix that if we go to set up input components, and the entire container view can have a background color of UI color dot white color. So doing that will just give us a opaque white for the bottom area of the input container view. So click there, we get this opaque white now. which pretty much does the trick. So let's move on to actually putting some of the text messages inside of these blue cells. All right, how do we do that inside of a collection view controller? Well, let's look at view.load. Instead of registering this collection view cell, we actually need to create another cell inside of view. Let's just use new file and source CocoaTouch class, and this cell will be called chat message cell. Is a pretty good name for this file. And the reason why we need to create this chat message cell is because unlike UI table views, UI table view cells don't have or UI table view cells have a default text label and detail label. In comparison to UI collection view cells, these cells don't have a default text label, so we need to create it ourselves in here. In other words, I need to create this let text view. Let's see, text view is of type UI text view. Creating this programmatically with this closure here. And we create this text view inside UI text view. Text view text equals some sample text for now. Returning this text view here. And why don't we just set the font to some kind of bigger font, system font of size, perhaps 16. And we execute this closure block, giving us whatever's inside here, setting it to text view. So nothing too bad, hopefully. And now we actually need to override some other methods to actually add this text view into this entire chat message cell. And we do that with this init frame method, which actually requires an override, just like what this warning tells us to do. And this requires this init fatal error guy. It's just an annoying issue with Swift, and we just need to do that. Anyhow, we should call super init with the frame parameter just to get things started off. And if I set this background color equal to UI color dot red color, we'll see exactly what this cell is going to do. So copying this chat message cell and going back to chat log controller, I can register the chat message cell instead, and I'm going to remove this blue color by deleting that line. And I should be seeing red cells instead of blue cells now because I have this cell registered. Hopefully you guys are used to how these cells work. So there we go. We are now confirmed that we are executing this UI color red color here. So I want to add this text view into this cell now by calling, let's remove this red color, add subview of text view, just like that. And just by doing this, we're not going to be able to see the text view. So we actually need to place it inside of this red area via some iOS 9 constraints. So iOS 9 constraints, and we'll just use X, Y, width, and height constraints right here. And don't forget, we always need to specify this tv.translates property to false first. And now I want to bring the text view to the right side of the entire cell. So I'm going to pin the X value to the right anchor by saying text view.right anchor, constrained to the entire cell's right anchor like that. And for the Y value, I'm going to pin it to the top of the cell, constrained to self.top anchor. Hopefully nothing too confusing. For the width anchor, I want to constrain to some kind of constant value of, let's say 200 pixels wide, and the text view.height anchor constrained to the entire height anchor of the cell, like that. And finally, if we say text or active equals true, this will activate this constraint right here. Active, and there we go. Hopefully if I run this, I'll see some text saying sample text inside of my collection view controller. And there we go, and we see this sample text guy right there. So let's see what is going on and why this is actually being cut off on the right there. So let's see. Okay. It looks good. So if I go back to chat log controller and I specify this right here. So the reason is because this is actually incorrect. So size for item at index path needs to be view frame width instead of height. So the height is a lot larger than the width. So hopefully you guys kind of caught that for me. And let's click into this guy and we see this bit of text inside of our entire controller. So not too bad. How do I get the actual messages inside of this collection view now? So let's see what happens inside of this observation. We fill out this messages array right here, in here somewhere, and we call the reload. So for cell, let's see, cell for item at index path, we can now access cell.textView somehow. So textView is not available until we downcast this cell as a chat message cell. And now we can set the text on it as, let's see, let message equal messages index path dot item. And we'll say message dot text right there. So that's going to give us the text value in each one of those cells that we see. So let's see, clicking on Tyrion Lannister, we get all of these messages here. So you can see already that the first message doesn't really belong to Tyrion Lannister because we're saying, hi Sam, and John says that to Sam Tarley down there. So how do we filter out the messages that don't belong to this user that we click into? Well, that's pretty easy if we go back to the observation method and inside of this line here. So let's see what happens right before the append right here. If we check if the message.chatPartnerID is equal to self.user ID, we will append the message like this, and then we will also reload the table like that. So I think this needs a optional like that. Okay. So the current user this user value is the current user that we click into. And what happens is if we click on Tyrion Lannister down here, we will check if the actual chat partner ID is Tyrion Lannister. If it's not, we don't append anything to the messages array. That's why we don't get those other irrelevant messages inside of our table view like that. And finally, if we want to make this draggable, all we need to do is go into Build It, load, and specify a property on collection view called always bounds vertical to true. So that's how we get the draggability of the collection view. So running, and now we're up, clicking on Tyrion Lannister, we get this guy right here. And that is a good place to stop. All right, that's going to wrap it up for today's video. Now you can already see how our chat log controller is coming together. We're also going to have to apply some optimizations that will include another fan out solution for our messages, just so we don't have to observe unnecessary nodes again. So that's going to be pretty exciting. I hope you guys will be looking forward to that. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to hit the thumbs up. And also you can stay tuned for the next episode by hitting that subscribe button. Okay, in the next episode, let's look at how we can improve the design of our chat log controller by including chat bubbles and also the user's image on the left. If you're really into good UI design, you should definitely watch out for this next episode. And furthermore, if you want to download the project for today's video lesson, you can click on the download link above. Follow me on Twitter at Build That App. Finally, if you want to learn more about iOS development, click on the 3 playlist links on the bottom to get even better at iOS programming. That's about it, guys. Keep on coding, and I'll see you next time.